Last time, we set up both the chat servers. We've got Rocket.Chat and we've got Stoat containers running smoothly inside Proxmox. So essentially we've built the rooms. Now it's time to build the secure front door. We'll be setting up a Caddy reverse proxy in a bare Linux container on Proxmox and then implementing DNS challenge via Cloudflare without the tunnel. That essentially means no traffic, no Nginx, and no Cloudflare tunnels for this setup. Controversial to some maybe, but I do have my reasons, which I will explain in the video. So let's get into it. Two ways to set up Caddy. First of all, we'll do it using command line, and then I'll show you exactly the same process, but using the GUI. So let's log into the Proxmox server. All right, now on the right-hand side here, we've got my note-keeping app, Obsidian, with all the notes and everything ready to go. So all I got to do is copy and paste. So first of all, we're going to create the Debian 12 container. Now, the reason I'm using Debian 12 and not Debian 13 is just purely about stability. Debian 12's an established distro. It's had all of the kinks and bugs and fixes all sorted now. And so although I am losing out on some of the latest versioning for some packages, the stability is much more important for this. It's a reverse proxy. It doesn't need to do a lot, but it needs to be on all the time. And because my chat servers will be running behind it, if that goes down, then people's communications go down. So yeah, availability is the priority here. So let's just make sure that is running. Yes, it is running. Awesome. All right, so we're gonna start configuring it now. As you can see, we're now in Caddy Ingress. First thing I'm going to do, update, upgrade. Then we will we do not want that tilde. Next, we will set up the Go compiler environment. Download the archive, extract the archive, set up environment variable. Now we're going to fetch and install the Xcaddy build tool. GNU PGP CA certs. Next, we're going to download a valid GPG key path. Nice. And then we're going to add the repo. Well, the repo configuration file. And then we're going to install Xcaddy. Now, the reason we're installing Xcaddy and not Caddy is because Xcaddy has the capacity for the DNS challenge with Cloudflare, has a module specifically for it. So, yeah. Really cool. Let's build this customized Caddy.
5 minutes later.
Next, we set the path and file permissions. Copy. Now we're going to set Caddy as a system service. Create the config directories. Create the systemd services file. So we're going to do nano. Oop, good spelling. X, Y, return. Next, we'll write the Caddy file. Now, you'll notice there is a part of this at the top, which is additional for this, for something, another feature that I want these servers to have. Normally, for these two servers and the reverse proxy, this is what we would set up. I have an environment variable for the Cloudflare API token, but here, this is so that I can take true logs of the servers. This is essentially telling Caddy that all of these IPv4 ranges are to be trusted, and it is okay to pass header information. It's okay to pass IP information through. Essentially, the X forwarded for. So we're going to set this up. Next one we're going to do is using nano again. Good spelling. And we're just going to copy this whole thing. We're going to do Control X, Y, return. Set up the environment variable. Creating a new config file. Well, override, called override.conf. This is where my API token is going to go. I'm not going to show you that because that would be a wild security mistake. So I'm just going to set this here just so you can see. But when you set the Cloudflare API token, this is where you're going to place it. Ooh, hang on, let me make sure that's there. Yep. Okay. So we're going to do Control X, Y, return. Set perms. Reload the daemon, and by enabling it, it means that every time the system starts, it will also start up. Okay, now that's essentially the Caddy reverse proxy container setup. Let's take a look at Proxmox, and as we can see here, these are the details that we set up at the very, very beginning of this in the setup command. We can see that number 101, it's also got 101 here. The IP information is also here. In terms of resources, you can see memory and swap, 512 megabytes each, one core, and it's being stored in the LXC pool. Well, storage. There we go. Awesome. So that's taking up just over 8.5 gigabytes of space. And there we have it. So that's using command line to set up Caddy with the DNS module. Now let's set up the same, but using the web GUI. So we're going to click Create CT, select the node. Let's just do 102 for this one. Host name. So what are we going to call this one? Let's call this Caddy Ingress 2. Unprivileged container. Allow nesting. Password. We will set the password here. We're not going to use SSH keys. Click Next. Template. I want to use Debian 12 standard. As you can see, that's this part of the script there that we were using. We're going to click Next. Storage, local ZFS. We're going to store, and this is where these two options here come in. We're going to store this in the LXC storage and going to keep it at 8 gigabytes. Skip replication, mount options. Let's do discard. Actually, no, let's keep it exactly as that was. Okay, well, maybe not exactly. Let's go. Can we? Oh, it's not going to let us undo that. Well, that was a bit silly, wasn't it? Oh well, just leave that. Don't do what I do. All right, next, CPU, one CPU. We're going to limit it to 1. Memory, 512 megabytes. Network next. So we're going to do name, ETH0 or ETH0, VMBR0, no VLAN. We're going to do 168. 3.102. 24 dot 168 dot 3.1. Keep it static. We're not going to give it an IPv6. No rate limited. Next, DNS domain. We're going to use the host settings. And then if we click Start after created, there we go. Task OK. That looks like it's been done. Let's close the dialog. Expand this just a little bit. And you can see there, you now have, so if we open up the console, well, again, you can do, we can go back to the console here. And if I do exit this, I'm back in the Citadel. I can do PCT status 102, and we can say it's running, and we can do, say, PCT enter 102. So you could spin it up in the GUI and then configure it in the CLI, or you could use the console, the VNC console here. But there you go, 2 ways to set up Caddy in a container without using Docker. First of all, we'll do this, the subdomains and CNAME records. So we're going to do select DNS, go to records, and we're going to click add record. Select CNAME, type in the subdomain, and then whoops, will be proxied through Cloudflare. If I click this button here for proxy status, I can choose to do, we can choose gray cloud or orange cloud for proxied or just DNS. If you're interested in the reasons why we're going to be using the the proxied service, then definitely stick around for the debrief at the end. But in this instance, I'm just showing you how to set this up. Very briefly though, this was about sort of the additional protections that we can get from Cloudflare. So we're going to click save. And then we're going to add another record. CNAME again. And we call this one Rocket. Again, this is going to go to it's going to be Orange Cloud Proxied. And there we go. And as you can see, that's essentially just followed the instructions so far. So next, we're going to enforce strict encryption mode. So we need to go to SSL/TLS. Going to go to Overview. Going to configure. It's already at full. And this is where it encrypts traffic between Cloudflare and your origin if the request uses HTTPS. But there is no cert validation. It accepts any cert, including self-signed. So if I do full strict, what that means is it's going to accept origin certificates issued by Cloudflare or signed by a trusted certificate authority. So it just bumps up the security for the requests just a little bit more. Okay. Next, we're going to generate an API key. So click on the profile, click API tokens, click create a token, edit zone DNS. The permission we're going to give it is zone, DNS, and edit. So this is obviously providing write access, edit access to anything is a risk, but we are going to specify it can only do this for, don't need to do any filtering. I'm not going to set a time to live. I'm going to continue to the summary and we're going to create token, copying that. Excellent. Now I'm just going to pause and copy this into my password manager. Okay, so I've copied that. There we go. And essentially what you'll do is you'll take the API key that you've just copied from there, store it somewhere safe for yourself. I use Bitwarden Password Manager. Then it gets copied into that config file. And that, I believe, is everything. Well, that's everything in Cloudflare anyway. Caddy Setup, Cloudflare Setup. The API token is now in the config file. So let's do the very final 3 commands. We'll reload the daemon. We'll restart Caddy. And then let's check the logs. Okay. Well, that all looks good. And there we go. Let's take a look at what we built today. We didn't build these, but these are just essentially what we connected today. First up, the reverse proxy. Next up, I have my gateway router. For port forwarding of 80 and 443. Then we have dynamic DNS. And then finally, we have Cloudflare, which has Okay, that's looking pretty good so far. So let's say we have a user who is using the Rocket.Chat app, which will be using the Rocket subdomain hosted by Cloudflare. This uses the CNAME record, which is canonical name record. So instead of like an A record, which points to a specific IP to resolve the domain name, it will resolve to another domain. The reason for that is this here. This is a dynamic DNS. So if I restart my router, if the lease expires or something happens on the ISP end, the network goes down and comes, just multitude of reasons, but essentially my IP address, the external IP address that you can find my network with, will change. And if I set up an A record with these Cloudflare domains, the subdomains, sorry, that will need updating alongside the external IP address every time it changes. And so rather than having to configure that, we'll just use a CNAME record. Easy peasy. Sends it to the name of this dynamic DNS. The dynamic DNS service, obviously the name stays the same. It continually resolves the new IP address from our ISP. That traffic then comes down to the router, and then this will be forwarding, as you can see here, port 80 and port 443, which is specifically for Caddy to do its thing. Now, 3 reasons I chose Cloudflare. One was the ability to pay for additional subdomains like Stoat and Rocket, so we could determine, so I could just use the single domain, and then depending on which one of those, the traffic will get routed to the relevant chat server. My DDNS provider doesn't have that option with the tier that I've paid for. Secondly is to do with the TLS communication. So for these servers to communicate over TLS, which means the communication online is encrypted, which is, again, part of this data sovereignty bit is I want private as possible within reason. You know, security also is an important aspect of this. So for that, for these servers to essentially have a certificate in order for them to communicate using TLS. Let's go back to this one. We need to get a cert. And there's 2 ways of doing that. One is a HTTP challenge, and the other one is a DNS challenge. Now, I didn't want to go with a HTTP challenge for the very simple reason that you have to have port 80 open. The certificate authority, you host a file at a path, and for the certificate authority to confirm that you have control of the domain name, it just needs to see that file, right? And then each time it checks, then it's all good, and the certificate can be signed. It's not to say that happens every day, but for that to happen, I need to leave port 80 open. And I don't want to do that because that also means that I'm advertising the IP address. It's an unnecessary risk when you have something called a DNS challenge. You know, this is one of the 3 reasons why I chose Cloudflare, a domain through Cloudflare, because I can set up the DNS challenge through Cloudflare. And essentially what that means is I don't need to have port 80 open. And Caddy will essentially write a TXT record against the domain name, which is linked to the certificate request with the certificate authority, and then the certificate authority just queries the TXT record, and so it doesn't even have to touch my server, which is great. Certainly for home labs or like home users, it's a very effective way of sort of transferring some risk. And thirdly, let's get rid of a bunch of this stuff. So we'll get rid of the. So essentially, at the moment, let's use a different color. Let's do white. And so, this is my LAN. This is my trusted. This is trusted, right? And this is the WAN. And this is untrusted. This is the scary, big bad. Let's say, for example, I was just using Cloudflare for DNS, and no other protections whatsoever. That means that essentially all of the traffic that comes here, the reverse proxy terminates the TLS connection. That means that I've got to make sure that this perimeter here is absolutely locked down. But the problem is, it also means that I'm open to various things like DDoS, layer 7 attacks, and I've got a consumer grade router. I don't have an enterprise firewall. I don't have load balancers. So it's a home lab. It's a simple setup, right? The advantage here is that by doing this, let's go back to orange. For some reason I like orange. The encryption of the communications of these chat servers goes all the way down here. And so in terms of data sovereignty, this is the preferred method because it means that the only time communications on these servers is decrypted is once it's in my network. And so that kind of fits well with the sort of the data sovereignty needs. But another aspect of managing data, not just data sovereignty, but just managing data, is the security of it. And so by using, probably should have used orange for this. So I'm not using Cloudflare just for DNS. I'm actually using their what's called the orange cloud. And that's where they essentially become the proxy, which means that when we come back to this question of encryption, the TLS termination is now on their edge. It's now on Cloudflare's edge. So it's decrypted, and then it's re-encrypted before it's sent to Caddy, which is the eventual TLS termination for the communications. But this bit here, this was the real question, because now it means that all the communications is plain text. It's unencrypted on Cloudflare servers. But what we get for this is we get to hide this IP down here, and this IP here. We get to hide this information behind Cloudflare's IP address ranges. They also provide DDoS protection, layer traffic protection. There's also metrics, security metrics that I can view on the Cloudflare portal. And although, for privacy purists, they'll be like, well, you have lost control of some of the data. What if Cloudflare gets subpoenaed for information on your server? And, that's actually true. Like they have access. They can see the information. If we were a strictly privacy-focused community, to be honest, we'd set it up a different way. We'd probably use something like Matrix, which is a federated chat service, and we'd probably, or we'd find some way of having a chat server set up using Tailscale. It would just have a different topology. Whereas it's a gaming community, it's group of friends, and so the main reason was we didn't appreciate how Discord treated our data. And so we wanted a bit more control of it in that respect. And I guess this is taking some level of control of that situation. And part of that was making the decision to trust Cloudflare with our data, but also for that trust, we're also gaining a lot of extra protection and security and obfuscation for this server. And so, yeah, it's a really good example of, in security, there is no perfect setup. There is nothing which is like a silver bullet. Everything is a trade-off. And so you have to just work out where you want to put your risk and what you're willing to accept. Obviously, there are certain things you have to mitigate. We've done as much of that as we possibly can. The external IP is obfuscated as much as it possibly can be. We're using DNS challenge instead of HTTP challenge, so we don't have to have a port 80 open for that query. And so, yeah, those are the reasons why this setup has been done the way it has. Cool. Thanks for watching.